Lecky was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that felt rich. Inside the big white house with tall glass windows, Ruth was already awake. She had been up since 5:30 a.m. Ruth was 25 years old, slim, dark-skinned, and soft-spoken. She moved with the quiet grace of someone who didn't like stress, but she noticed everything. She worked as a maid in the home of one of Lagos's big lawyers, Mr. David Cole. She folded clothes, wiped the center table, cleaned the kitchen sink, and arranged the files that were scattered across the dining room. They belonged to David, her boss. David Cole was in his early 30s, tall, well-dressed, well-spoken, one of those people who looked serious even when he was laughing. He was a lawyer and co-founder of one of the big law firms on Victoria Island. People respected him, but he hardly noticed small things, especially the people who worked under him. As Ruth cleaned, she handled his files like someone who understood them. She arranged the documents by date, wiped the corners of the pages, and even removed a wrong paper from one folder and kept it aside. She wasn't guessing. She wore her plain gown, tied her scarf, and walked barefoot across the marble tiles. Her face was calm, her eyes sharp but quiet. By 8:45 a.m., David came downstairs dressed in a fine navy blue suit, holding his car keys and checking his phone. "Ruth," he called, not looking up. "Yes, sir." "Please iron the extra white shirt in my room, and check if my black court shoes are clean." "Yes, sir," she replied softly. She went upstairs immediately. About 30 minutes later, the bell rang. It was loud. Rich people type bell. Ruth wiped her hands and opened the front door. It was Sandra. Sandra was David's on-and-off girlfriend. She was in her 30s, light-skinned, loud, and always dressed like she was going somewhere important, even when she wasn't. She had grown up with money and acted like it. She didn't like people who didn't speak good English or wear expensive perfume, especially maids. "Ah," Sandra said, rolling her eyes. "You again." Ruth bent slightly. "Good morning, Ma." Sandra walked in. She had a big handbag and perfume that entered the room before her body did. "Where is David?" she asked. "In the living room, Ma." Sandra didn't even thank her. As she walked in, she turned back sharply and said, "Next time you want to open the door, open it well. You nearly jammed my face. Use your sense small. Abby, is it only broom you know how to carry?" Ruth paused. She wanted to answer. But she looked at David, who had heard. He was standing by the couch. He said nothing. "No, Sandra, that's enough. No, don't talk to her like that. Not even eye contact with Ruth." Ruth just nodded. "Sorry, Ma." She turned quietly and went back to the kitchen. She didn't even sigh out loud. But in her heart, something small tightened. She had felt it before, too many times. It was the feeling of being invisible. That evening, after cleaning the kitchen one last time and making sure the back door was locked, Ruth slipped into her small room behind the main house, the boys' quarters. Her feet were tired, her back ached, but her face still carried the same quiet look, calm, like someone who had swallowed fire but didn't want the world to smell smoke. The room was small but neat. Her books were packed in a corner, her bag of clothes under the bed. On the wooden table beside her mattress was a small phone charger, an old notepad, and a tiny mirror. No luxury, but no mess. She sat on the bed, exhaled softly, and reached for her phone. The screen was slightly cracked but still working. She clicked on WhatsApp, scrolled to the name Joy, and pressed the video call icon. It rang twice. Then the face appeared, full cheeks, bright eyes, headscarf half-tied. "Hello, Ruth," the girl on screen shouted, grinning. Joy was 21, bold and playful, studying mass communication at Unilag. She looked like Ruth, but her energy was louder. Where Ruth was quiet, Joy was fire. "I hope you're not disturbing your neighbors with that noise," Ruth said, smiling. "Please, please. Let me shout small. It's not every day my sister calls with a madam face. See you now, all serious like you're in court." Ruth chuckled. "How was class today?" Joy waved her hand. "Same thing. The lecturer did not come. The generator didn't work, but we had gathered and read inside the corridor. You know now. We're managing." Ruth nodded. She understood managing too well. There was a short silence. Then Joy leaned closer to the camera. "Wait, why do you look tired like this? Who annoyed you again?" Ruth looked away briefly. "I'm fine," she said. "Just one of those days." "Did your boss's girlfriend come again?" That yellow one that always acts like she owns the country? Ruth smiled lightly. She came, made noise, left. Nothing new? Joy hissed loudly. That one? If I catch her on the road, Joy, please, Ruth laughed. Let's not start. Another pause. Then Joy narrowed her eyes. You know what I still don't understand? What? You, with all your fine English, your school awards, your mass comm degree, everything. You're washing plates and mopping floors for people that don't even greet you well? Ruth sighed. It wasn't the first time she'd heard this, but something about hearing it again, tonight, after Sandra's insult. It touched a part of her that was tired of being strong. She looked at Joy, then at the wall behind her, then back at the screen. It's just for a while, she said quietly. I know things will get better. Joy looked at her sister for a few seconds. Then she softened. They will, she said. You're not just anybody, Ruth. Life may have bent you small, but you're not broken. Ruth smiled, a tired, thankful smile. Then she reached for the notepad on her table, opened it, and added one more line to the back page, where she kept small reminders to herself. Don't forget who you are, even when nobody else sees it. Then she lay down and closed her eyes slowly. The next morning, while Ruth swept the veranda and Mrs. Musa prepared beans and plantain in the kitchen, her boss was already across town, sitting in an air-conditioned boardroom, sipping black coffee, and nodding to yet another email alert. David Cole, in his signature navy suit and brown leather shoes, sat at the long table inside his firm's office on Victoria Island. The office had white walls, gold frames, and glass everywhere. You couldn't sit there without feeling important. Across from him sat Mr. Bello, the senior partner of the firm, early 50s, big stomach, wide voice, always wearing Agbada and power perfume. He had old money and didn't hide it. By the window stood Sandra, in a fitted dress and heels, scrolling through her phone and half listening. She had followed David to the office, just to see how planning was going, but everybody knew Sandra never came anywhere without an agenda. So, Mr. Bello said, clapping his hands together, 10 years, gentlemen and ladies, 10 whole years. We started with just one room and one client. Now we have 3 floors and multinational cases. He laughed proudly. We have to celebrate it well. David nodded. I already called Echo Hotel. The big hall is available next Saturday. Good, Mr. Bello said. We'll invite our big clients, judges, even the French guy, what's his name, Okafor. Sandra raised her head at that. You should also invite everyone from the house, she said casually. She turned and smiled at David. Even that your maid. David blinked. Ruth? Yes, nah. Let's see if she will wear her apron to the party. Mr. Bello burst into laughter. Ah, Sandra, you're wicked-o. Sandra shrugged, enjoying herself. I mean, let's be fair. David said the girl is quiet and respectful. Let her come and mingle with the big boys. Abby, is it only jollof rice she knows? Mr. Bello wiped tears from his eyes, still laughing. You know, poor people don't know how to behave around money. Before you know it, she'll be asking the DJ to play Fuji. David smiled, trying not to laugh too hard. A small part of him felt uneasy, but he said nothing. He adjusted his tie and said, All right, I'll tell her she can come. Sandra raised one eyebrow. You sure she even has party clothes? Mr. Bello added, Let her wear a uniform. At least we'll know who brought the small chops. The laughter returned. Nobody in that room asked if Ruth wanted to come. Nobody cared how she would feel. It wasn't a real invitation. It was a test, a trap. David told himself he was being fair. But deep down, even he knew. They just wanted to laugh at the maid. That evening, the front gate opened with a soft creak. David's black SUV rolled into the compound, smooth and shiny. He stepped out, loosened his tie, and walked into the house. Sandra was right behind him, laughing at something on her phone. She wore high heels and a short gown with glittering stones that reflected light from the chandelier. In the living room, the house smelled of polish and stew. Ruth had cleaned and cooked before they returned. She came out of the kitchen as she heard the door open. Welcome, sir. Welcome, Ma, she said, head slightly bowed. David dropped his car keys on the table and cleared his throat. Ruth, he said casually, not looking at her too long. Yes, sir. We're having a party on Saturday. The firm is celebrating 10 years. It's at Echo Hotel. Ruth nodded. Okay, sir. David glanced briefly at Sandra, then back at Ruth. You can come, he added, if you know how to behave. The words floated in the air like a test question. Not warm, not kind, just sharp and polite. Sandra smiled like someone who had just finished stirring pepper soup. She looked Ruth up and down, then said, But please don't wear nylon slippers there, Ro. It's not one of those your I'm just going to buy Maggie places. Ruth looked at them. David with his cold face, Sandra with her sharp tongue. She understood immediately. This was not an invitation. It was a setup. They expected her to come in wrapper or native wear that didn't fit, to stand in a corner, to embarrass herself, so they could laugh. But Ruth didn't flinch. She didn't drop her eyes. She just smiled softly and replied, Thank you, sir. I will consider it. Then she picked up the tray of glasses from the table and walked quietly back into the kitchen. She didn't look back, but in her mind, something had already started shifting. Ruth didn't sleep well that night. She tossed, turned, stared at the ceiling fan. She kept hearing Sandra's voice, Don't wear nylon slippers there, and David's cold tone, if you know how to behave. By morning, she had made up her mind. She packed her small handbag, wore jeans and a simple top, tied her scarf, and left the house quietly. She took 2 buses and a motorcycle. The sun was already hot. The air smelled of traffic and sweat. But Ruth didn't mind. She just wanted to see one person who made sense in her life. Joy's hostel was off campus, tucked behind a bakery in Yaba. The building was old but strong, with long corridors, noisy neighbors, and buckets lined up outside every door. She knocked. Who is that? Joy's voice called. It's me. The door flung open. Joy stood there in a wrapper and vest, holding a piece of bread in one hand. Her face lit up immediately. Ruth! You didn't even tell me you were coming. Ruth entered and hugged her. It was the first real hug she'd had in weeks. They sat on the mattress, legs crossed. The room was small, just 1 table, 2 buckets, and a wall full of sticky notes and exam timetables. But it felt safe. Joy didn't waste time. What happened? Ruth explained everything. How David had invited her to the firm's party. How Sandra added her usual insult. How it didn't feel like an honor, just a joke waiting to happen. They didn't invite me to celebrate me, Ruth said quietly. They want to mock me. Joy threw her bread down and sat up straight. No. Joy. No, she said again louder. You will go. You will not hide. You will not let rich people define you. You are not their slave. Ruth looked down. Joy's voice softened. Do you know what you are to me? Ruth didn't answer. You are the one who paid my first acceptance fee. You are the one who stood by me when they carried Daddy to the hospital. You are the one who wakes up before sunrise to clean for people who can't even say thank you. And you're ashamed? Ruth's eyes blinked slowly. The words were cutting, but healing. You've worked harder than all those people. You have carried this family. I won't let you shrink yourself. There was a long silence between them. Then Joy said, When you go back, check your things. Look inside that old bag you used to carry during NYSC, the one you hide under your bed. Ruth frowned lightly. Why? Because everything that will remind you who you are is inside there. Ruth nodded slowly. She knew exactly the bag Joy was talking about, the old one at the back of her BQ room, the one she hadn't opened in years. And for the first time that day, Ruth smiled, small but sure. That evening, Ruth returned to Lecky just before sunset. The compound was quiet. The cook, Mrs. Musa, was already locking the kitchen door for the night. Ruth greeted her softly and went straight to her small boy's quarters. She sat on the bed. For a moment she just looked at the old bag under her bed, the one Joy had reminded her about. Then she reached for it. It was dusty, a little flat, the zipper stiff. But when she opened it, memories jumped out before her fingers did. There were old notebooks, faded ID cards, some worn-out papers, and a scarf from her NYSC days, the soft green one she used to wear during reading sessions in the north. She picked up a document. At the top, the title read, Community Readers for Girls Volunteer Planning Notes, Kaduna Zone. And just like that, her mind went back. Flashback. 3 years earlier, Abuja. Ruth was standing in front of a chalkboard under a tree. A group of girls, ages 8 to 16, sat on mats around her, their eyes wide, their notebooks small. Some didn't even have slippers. But they came, every week. She held up a flashcard. B is for book. What do we do with books? We read them, the girls shouted. She smiled. Why do we read? A small girl in the front raised her hand shyly. So we can grow. Ruth clapped. Correct. That was her world back then. She worked with a small NGO, Literacy for Girls, a project that created community reading clubs for out-of-school girls across northern Nigeria. She wasn't just a volunteer. She coordinated 3 zones, Kaduna, Nasarawa, and parts of FCT. She trained other volunteers, organized reading camps, even wrote their quarterly reports. She didn't do it for pay. In fact, most months, she had to borrow from her own NYSC allowance to buy books and pencils for the girls. But she didn't mind, because Ruth believed in it. She believed girls could change the world if somebody would just hand them a book and say, try. The funding ended the next year. The donors pulled out. The NGO closed down. Around that same time, her father had a stroke. Her mother had already passed years before. Now she was alone. She packed her things, left Abuja, and came to Lagos to hustle. People told her to look for office work. She tried, sent CVs, waited, followed up. Nothing came. She had bills to pay. Hospital, rent, food, and medicine. So when someone told her about a house help job in Lekki, she took it. Just for a short while. Something to keep the light on at home and the drugs going. She became the maid. Quiet, clean, efficient. But every night she would send money back home. Every week, she would call the hospital. Every month, she would beg the doctor for a discount on her father's dialysis. And when he passed away the following year, it was Ruth who paid for the burial. Nobody from the Lekki house knew. Nobody asked. But she kept waking up at 5:30 every day, kept ironing shirts, kept saying yes sir and yes ma'am. Back in her room now, in the present, Ruth placed the old flashcard on her lap and touched the corner gently. Tears didn't fall, but something deep inside her shifted. She wasn't crying. She was remembering. Not just her past, her worth. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over Lekki. The compound was calm, the kind of calm that comes before something changes forever. It was Saturday, the day of the party, the day they thought she would show up and disgrace herself. Inside her small room, Ruth sat quietly on the bed, still holding the old flashcard from the night before. She looked around at the space that had held her pain, her prayers, her waiting. Then she stood up. She had made up her mind. By 10 a.m., Joy arrived, unannounced, full of energy as usual. She entered the BQ with foo-foo stubbornness. "Let's go," she said. Ruth looked at her. "Go where?" "To get you ready. I don't have a new dress." Joy opened her small bag. "That's why I'm here." Mrs. Musa, the elderly cook, had already offered one of her good native outfits, soft lace with brown embroidery. But when Ruth stepped out of the bathroom and held it up, Joy shook her head. "No, you'll look like them, like you're trying to beg for space in their world. So what should I wear?" Ruth asked quietly. Joy smiled. "I borrowed something." From inside her own nylon bag, Joy gently pulled out a folded green dress, long, simple, elegant. No noise, no shine, just quiet beauty. "It's from my roommate. She said you can use it." Ruth touched the fabric. It felt like silk, but soft and light, like something that didn't shout, but still held presence. "You're sure?" "Try it," Joy said. By early afternoon, the transformation began. Ruth applied light makeup, just powder, lip balm, and a touch of eyeliner. Her face already carried its own beauty. Her long, natural hair was washed and styled into a neat, sleek ponytail, all simple and smooth with no attachments. She wore no earrings, only a plain silver bracelet Joy insisted on. When she finally stepped out in the emerald dress, the room went quiet. Even Joy, who always had something to say, just stared. "You look like one of those women that own the land but don't talk too much," she whispered. As Ruth adjusted the dress one last time, Mrs. Musa entered slowly from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her wrapper. She stopped when she saw Ruth. Her eyes softened. Then she came forward and held both of Ruth's hands. "My daughter," she said. "Yes, Ma," Ruth replied gently. "Go with dignity. Don't let them see you shaking." Ruth nodded, her voice calm. "Yes, Mom." Mrs. Musa raised her hands and prayed. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet Yoruba English prayers full of love and power. When she was done, Ruth hugged her. And then, without any fanfare, she picked up her small bag and walked out the back door. The sun was still up. The streets were busy. Lagos was doing what Lagos always did. But Ruth was different. And as she entered the taxi heading toward Echo Hotel, her heart did not shake. The glass doors of Echo Hotel's grand hall slid open slowly as guests stepped in, one after another. Inside, the party was already in full swing. Men in fine agbadas, women in designer gowns, lace front wigs, heels taller than ambition. The kind of crowd where even the wristwatches knew they were expensive. Waiters moved up and down with wine glasses and small chops. Music played softly, live band, old school jazz. A saxophonist in the corner was blowing something smooth. At the center of it all stood Sandra, tall, glowing, glass in hand, laughing a little too loudly. She was in her element, the light-skinned socialite girlfriend. She knew people here, politicians, influencers, fashion people, and she had a story ready for them. "You people should wait," she told a group by the cocktail table, her voice full of sugar and pepper. "You haven't seen anything yet. My boyfriend invited his maid." Someone raised an eyebrow. "His what?" Sandra laughed. "House girl. I'm telling you, she'll enter with rubber slippers and a small bag. I just hope she doesn't come with a broom." They all laughed. Then, the main doors opened, and the laughter stopped. Ruth walked in, alone, calm, dressed in the long emerald green gown that moved like soft water with every step. Her skin glowed, not from makeup, but from care. Her bun was smooth, clean, and elegant. No loud jewelry, no noise, just presence. Simple, beautiful, and absolutely unmistakable. The kind of beauty that didn't beg for attention. It commanded it quietly. The entire room paused, heads turned. Whispers started. "Who is that? Is she one of the partner's wives? Maybe she's David's new girlfriend? No, she looks too classy, but I've never seen her before." At the far end of the hall, David Cole was standing with two senior lawyers, reviewing the program for the night. He looked up and froze. He didn't recognize her at first. His mind had prepared for a rapper. Head tie. Native with oversized head tie. A shy girl looking lost. But this woman looked like someone who had always belonged in the room. And she walked like she wasn't trying to prove anything to anybody. Just there. Sandra's smile dropped slowly. She blinked, tilted her head and squinted. "Wait, is that—" Yes, it was Ruth, the same girl who used to sweep the staircase in silence. The same girl who used to clean her lipstick stains off the guest bathroom mirror. She was now standing by the entrance like she had been invited by the world itself. Ruth looked around once, then started walking slowly into the hall. Not proud, not timid, just calm. A storm in heels. And as she passed, people made space without even meaning to, because something about her made the noise in the room go quiet. Minutes passed, and the room was still watching. Some smiled politely, others whispered. But Sandra? Sandra's face was burning. She had planned the joke. She had expected ruffles and awkward shoes. She had prepared her own laugh and invited others to join her. Now those same people were staring, not at her, but at Ruth, the poor maid. She couldn't take it anymore. She handed her drink to someone and marched across the hall, her heels clapping like warning shots on the tiled floor. Ruth turned calmly. Sandra stopped in front of her, lips already curled with sarcasm. "This is not the kitchen." Ruth didn't flinch, didn't look away. She just smiled, soft, effortless. "Yes, madam. That's why I dressed for the hall." The sentence hung in the air like fresh perfume. Polite, perfect, and aimed straight at the ego. A few people around them heard it. Someone covered their mouth, another turned away to hide their grin. Sandra blinked, once, then twice. Before she could fire back, a voice interrupted. "David." They turned. Standing nearby were Mr. Bello and two of the firm's senior partners, tall men in agbadas and English suits, holding wine glasses like they were holding power itself. Mr. Bello, wide-chested and always watching, tilted his head slightly as he looked at Ruth. "You didn't tell us you have this kind of staff," he said slowly, eyes moving from her dress to her face. David, who had finally made his way across the room, cleared his throat awkwardly. "She's, that's Ruth. She works in my house." "Oh," one of the other partners muttered, clearly unsure how to respond. She doesn't look like staff," Mr. Bello finished. "That's a compliment." Sandra folded her arms, frowning hard. "But Ruth?" She stepped forward just a little, smiled gently, and greeted them. "Good evening, sirs. I've seen your faces on the firm's annual reports. It's good to meet you in person." Her voice was soft, clear, and confident. No struggle, no fear. The partners paused. One of them raised his brows. "You read our reports?" "Yes," Ruth said. "I usually help organize Mr. Cole's documents at home. Sometimes I glance through." "Interesting," Mr. Bello said, now staring at her differently. Sandra tried to jump in. "She just reads surface things, not deep legal." Ruth turned to her slowly, still smiling. "I mostly focus on your outreach cases. The Community Disputes Desk has very rich case studies. I learned a lot." Even Mr. Bello chuckled. Sandra opened her mouth, but nothing came out. David said nothing. Ruth turned back to the partners and added, "It's a lovely event. Thank you for allowing house staff to attend. That was very thoughtful." Another line that felt soft, but sharp. Nobody could say anything rude. But everyone knew Ruth was not ordinary. And for the first time that night, the class line began to blur. The hall was still buzzing quietly from Ruth's last reply. David stood like a man watching a story unfold with no clue how it would end. His eyes were on Ruth, but his mind was running through memories. Had she really been in his house all this time, reading legal case files, understanding them? He had never asked, never thought to. And now, the woman he barely noticed was commanding the attention of Mr. Bello, the firm's founding partner. Beside him, Sandra was boiling, her fists clenched around her clutch bag, the veins in her neck stiff. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. This was supposed to be a quiet humiliation, not a red carpet moment. She opened her mouth to say something cutting, but before she could speak, the doors opened again. A hush swept across the crowd. In stepped a tall man in a grey caftan, with a silk scarf draped over his shoulders and a quiet confidence that made people step aside without being told. Mr. Pierre Okafor, businessman, investor, Nigerian-French philanthropist, founder of the Okafor Foundation for Displaced Communities, and tonight's special guest. He moved through the hall with ease, shaking hands, nodding gently to people he knew. Then, his eyes landed on Ruth. He stopped in his tracks, his face lit up instantly. "Ruth? Ruth Adams? From the Abuja Reading Project?" The entire room froze. All eyes turned. Ruth blinked once and then smiled. "Good evening, sir." "My goodness," he said, stepping forward. "You are the same Ruth who coordinated the literacy camps in Kaduna, yes? The one who anchored our language recovery conference?" She nodded it gently. "Yes, sir, that was me." Mr. Okafor turned to the crowd, arms open in surprise. "This young woman, do you know who she is?" People leaned in. "This is Ruth Adams," he said, "the woman who managed over 700 girls in our Northern Literacy program. She speaks fluent French, Hausa, Yoruba, and even a little Kanuri. 7 languages in total, if I remember correctly." Gasps. Phones started coming out. Someone near the back hit record. "She was instrumental," Mr. Okafor continued. "When we needed help during the IDP camp relocation project, it was Ruth who managed communication between the local women and our international staff. I don't think half the reports would have been written properly without her translation and field coordination." Ruth stood still, humble, but not shrinking. Sandra looked like the air had left her body. David looked like someone had just handed him his own blindness. One of the younger lawyers whispered, "Wait, that girl is a housemaid?" Another replied, "No, that's a whole woman of UNESCO-level achievements." Mr. Okafor turned back to Ruth. "I always wondered what happened to you after the Abuja office closed. You disappeared. Ruth gave a small smile. Life happened, sir. He nodded slowly. Well, life may have paused you, but it didn't erase you. Click, flash. The recording phones were catching everything. Ruth's name, her story, the crowd's stunned silence, Sandra's pressed face. And somewhere near the drinks table, a small-time blogger, holding his phone sideways, was already uploading the clip to TikTok. The energy in the hall had completely shifted. Ruth stood quietly by the side of the room, trying to fade into the background again, but it was too late for that. People were still whispering, still recording. David hadn't moved. Sandra had stepped away, pretending to take a phone call, but her hand was shaking slightly. And that's when Thomas, a young journalist with dreadlocks, sneakers, and a press tag that read Vibe Africa Media, stepped forward. He had been assigned to cover the event, mostly for photo ops and influencer gossip. But now he had found the story. He switched on his small mic and walked up to Ruth. "Excuse me," he said, polite but excited. "I'm Thomas. I'm with Vibe Africa. Mind if I ask you something for our Insta reel?" Ruth looked at him, then at the camera behind him. She gave a small nod. "Go ahead," she said. The phone started recording. Thomas cleared his throat. "People online are saying the maid at this elite law firm's event is actually a development worker, a literacy expert, a multilingual coordinator. Is it true?" Ruth looked into the camera, not shy, not boastful, just truthful. "I was a community coordinator," she said softly. "I worked on literacy programs for girls in the North. I speak several languages, but I also clean houses now." Thomas raised his eyebrows slightly. "And how do you feel about that switch?" Ruth paused, then spoke slowly, every word landing like a pin drop. "In Nigeria, people confuse salary with value. We act like the more someone earns, the more human they are." She looked directly at the lens. "But cleaners are important too. Laborers are instrumental. We all play a role. A pilot can't fly without the man who cleans the runway. A lawyer can't focus if his home is in chaos." She folded her hands calmly. "Domestic work is not shameful. It's just that we live in a country where the rich think being poor is a moral failure." Thomas nodded, visibly moved. "Wow. Anything else you'd like to say?" Ruth gave a quiet smile. Then came the line that changed everything. "I clean houses now, but I have never stopped building people." The moment she said it, even Thomas lowered the mic for a second. "Thank you," he whispered. "That was gold." She nodded. "Have a good evening." Hours later, the clip hit the internet. On Instagram, then TikTok, then Twitter. Caption: "The maid who left a whole ballroom speechless. Her name is Ruth Adams. Listen to her words." Thomas of at Vibe Africa Media. The video spread like Harmattan fire. People reposted, commented, debated, praised. "I don't know her, but I want to hug her. This woman just humbled half of Lagos. Her voice is calm, but everything she said slapped me spiritually." New wallpaper. "I clean houses now, but I have never stopped building people." By midnight, the clip had reached over 500K views. By morning, the world would no longer know her as David Cole's maid. She would be known as Ruth Adams, the woman who reminded Lagos what dignity looks like. By 7 a.m., the internet was on fire. On Twitter, X, Instagram, TikTok, and even Facebook, Ruth's video was everywhere. The caption changed slightly on each platform, but the message was the same. "The maid who shamed Lagos big girls." Another one said, "When a woman with purpose walks into a room, even the rich get uncomfortable." There were photos, edits, threads, hot takes. Someone created a side-by-side post. On the left, Sandra, dressed in full designer wear, mid-eye roll at the party. On the right, Ruth, calm in her emerald green dress, speaking on camera. The caption under it read, "One came to impress, one came with purpose." The comments came hard and fast. "So this Sandra person was mocking her? Yikes." Imagine trying to humiliate someone and ending up embarrassed on behalf of your entire class. "This Ruth woman needs to be on Arise TV this week." Why do we always wait for strangers to validate our own people? Meanwhile, in Lekki, David Cole was sitting in his home office, phone in hand, watching the clip for the 5th time. He couldn't sleep. Not properly. All night, his phone had been vibrating. Missed calls, mentions, DMs. He had tried to block it out, But now, as the sun pushed through the blinds, there was no running from it. He watched Ruth, standing in front of that phone, speaking gently but firmly. Cleaners are important too. Laborers are instrumental. I clean houses now, but I have never stopped building people. He swallowed hard. The truth of her words hit him differently now, not just because they were powerful, but because he had never seen her. She had lived in his house for nearly 2 years, quiet, efficient, invisible. He had let Sandra mock her. He had laughed along with Mr. Bello. He had invited her to the party as a joke. Now the whole country knew her name, and his name was being dragged along with Sandra's in every post. His phone rang again. It was the office. He picked up. His secretary's voice sounded tense. "Sir, clients are calling." "About what?" David asked, though he already knew. "About last night. About the video. They want to know why a member of your household staff was being insulted on camera at your firm's event." David leaned back in his chair. They said, "What?" "Some are saying it shows the firm in a bad light, that it makes us look classist." David closed his eyes. His mind was spinning. All he could think of was Ruth's voice, Ruth's calm eyes, Ruth's silence all these years, while he pretended fairness was enough. He had never said a word when she was treated like she was beneath the room. Now the world was asking, why was she even in the background in the first place? And David, for the first time in a long time, felt ashamed. By 10:15 a.m., David was already at the Victoria Island office, walking past glass walls and unreadable stairs. The firm's boardroom was full. Mr. Bello sat at the head of the table in his usual agbada, arms crossed, face stone hard. The other partners, 5 in total, were seated around him, murmuring over hot coffee and the day's headlines. On the table, someone had already printed out screenshots from social media. Ruth's face, the caption, the comments. Sandra's name is trending for the wrong reasons. One of the junior partners pushed the papers aside. "This thing has gone far. Look at the blogs, they've carried it like wildfire." Mr. Bello slammed his palm on the table. "This is making us look classist." Silence fell. Then he added slowly, "We cannot be the firm associated with mocking poor people at corporate events. That's not our brand." David cleared his throat. "We weren't the ones mocking her. It was Sandra. At our event," Mr. Bello cut in sharply. "In your circle. In your house. And she was your maid." Another partner leaned in. "There's already one video where she said she works in your home. The public doesn't care about details. The optics are bad, very bad." Mr. Bello nodded. "We need to take action, quietly." David's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" The room exchanged glances. Then one of them said it. "We recommend that we terminate her employment. Respectfully. Quietly." David frowned. "On what grounds?" Mr. Bello responded without blinking. "House staff should not attend official corporate functions. That's the line we'll use." "But she was invited," David said. "And now it's blowing up in our faces," another partner snapped. "Did you see the client email from Cora Group? They said they're considering future collaborations." All because of how the situation was handled. David looked around the room. Lawyers, strategists, men who knew how to twist truth into convenience. "She didn't do anything wrong," he said softly. "She spoke with dignity. She didn't curse. She didn't insult anyone. She embarrassed people without raising a voice," Mr. Bello said. "And now she's a symbol. That's dangerous." David sat back. He wanted to argue, to fight for her. But he also knew they were protecting the firm, not the truth. And somewhere deep inside him, he was torn. Because Ruth hadn't come to make a statement, she had just come as herself. A brilliant woman dulled by life's unfairness. A woman they all ignored. Now that the world saw her, they wanted to erase her again. And David? David didn't know which silence was worse. The one before she spoke, or the one they were now trying to force her back into. The room was tense. The partners sat still, waiting for David to agree. Waiting for him to do what was safe, to sign off, let Ruth go quietly, and protect the firm's reputation. David looked at each of them, then folded his arms slowly on the table. "I'm not supporting this," he said. Mr. Bello raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" David's voice stayed calm, but firm.
She didn't hurt anyone. She didn't damage our brand. She spoke the truth. She carried herself with more dignity than some of the people we call clients. Silence.
Two wrongs won't make this right, he continued. We mocked her. Not just Sandra, all of us, me included. We made space for disrespect in the name of class. Now that the world saw her worth, we want to act like we never saw her at all. No one spoke. A few partners looked down at the table. Mr. Bellow's jaw tightened, but he didn't reply. David nodded slowly. I won't be part of it. And just like that, the meeting ended. No applause, no loud arguments. Just silence, the kind that follows truth when it lands in a room full of pride. Later that evening, David sat alone in his office. He opened his laptop and replayed the now viral video again. Ruth's voice filled the room, clear and steady. He closed his eyes. 2 years. She had lived in his house, cleaned his shelves, ironed his suits, brought his food. And he had never asked her what she wanted from life. He had never thought to ask about her dreams, her past, her skills, her pain. He had let Sandra insult her, not once, not twice, but over and over again. And what had Ruth done in return? Stayed kind, stayed quiet. David felt a heaviness in his chest. Not guilt for the trending post, but shame for being blind. He stood up suddenly, grabbed his keys, and left the office. By 7:45 p.m., he was back at the house in Lekki. He walked past the gate, past the marble staircase, and down the corridor to the BQ. He knocked once. No reply. He knocked again, then turned the handle gently and peeked in. The room was empty. The bed was made. The notepad was gone. The NYSC bag was no longer under the table. Mrs. Musa came out of the kitchen and saw him standing there. She's not around, sir, she said softly. David turned. Where did she go? She asked for 2 days off, said she needed rest. David stood still for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay. That night, the house felt different, colder, quieter. He didn't realize how much of its peace came from Ruth's quiet hands, the way she moved gently through rooms, leaving them better than she found them. He walked past the dining room and saw a folder on the table. It was half open. Inside it was a stack of court documents. He reached for one. It had been arranged by date, alphabetically sorted, notes on yellow sticky paper written in her handwriting. She'd been doing more than housework for years. And he hadn't seen it. Now she was gone. Even if just for 2 days. He felt the absence. Loudly. He stood in the living room, his eyes still on the quiet file she had sorted. The house around him felt like it was holding its breath. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked the screen. Sandra. He stared at it for a few seconds, then let it ring. He had nothing to say to her. Not anymore. Meanwhile, Yaba same time. The air in Joy's hostel room was different. It wasn't large, but it was alive, full of laughter, wrappers on the floor, textbooks piled on chairs, and something more powerful than luxury. Hope. Ruth was sitting cross-legged on the mattress, sipping tea, her natural hair now in twists, her dress plain but neat. Her phone was vibrating every few minutes. Messages, emails, missed calls, opportunities. Joy sat beside her with her laptop open, scrolling through Ruth's inbox. Another one, she said. This one is from a small NGO in Ibadan. They want you to train their field officers on language inclusion. Ruth smiled. Joy continued, reading more out loud. Dear Miss Ruth Adams, we came across your video. Would you be open to mentoring young women in our church program? Hi Ruth. We are producers from Sunrise Morning Show on TV. Would you consider appearing for an interview? Good afternoon, Miss Ruth. I run a community learning space for young girls in Kano. We would love to speak with you about designing a reading framework. Ruth sat quietly, hands in her lap, listening. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Joy closed the laptop and looked at her. You say thank you. Then you choose. Ruth's eyes dropped for a moment. Then Joy leaned forward. I hope you know you're not going back there. Ruth didn't answer. Joy raised an eyebrow. Because I swear if you even think of going back to clean floors in that house, I'll drag you out myself. Ruth laughed softly. It's not about pride, Joy. That place gave me a roof when I needed it. Joy shook her head. They didn't value you. They only see you now because the world saw you first. That's not care. That's guilt. There was a pause. Then Ruth nodded slowly. I won't go back as a maid. Joy leaned back, arms folded. Good. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Ruth whispered, but I might go back. Joy's face tensed. For what? Not for a job. For a conversation. About what? Ruth looked at her sister, eyes steady, voice soft. To tell them what they never bothered to ask. And just like that, 2 days passed. But Ruth didn't return to Lecky. She didn't call. She didn't send a message. She didn't need to. Her absence was loud enough. And in the middle of that silence, David Cole opened his laptop, typed slowly, and for the first time, told the truth. He didn't write as a lawyer. He wrote as a man who had been wrong. That afternoon, he posted a statement to LinkedIn, then Instagram, then sent it directly to Punch newspaper. He didn't wait for his PR team. He didn't edit it 10 times. He just hit publish. Open letter, to everyone who watched the video and to the woman in it. My name is David Cole. I am a lawyer and co-founder of Cole Bello Legal Partners. I am also the man who invited Ruth Adams to an event, not to honor her, but to mock her. I was part of a conversation that treated a woman as a joke because of her job title, a maid. But I forgot, or maybe I never truly realized, that value is not tied to salary. Ruth Adams is not just a maid. She is a development worker, a linguist, a literacy coordinator who has helped hundreds of displaced and forgotten girls across Nigeria. And I, like many privileged Nigerians, am guilty of something we don't like to admit, believing we are better than others because we have more money. This is a class problem, and it is a heart problem. As a firm, we must do better. Today, I'm announcing the launch of a new initiative at Cole Bello, the Social Impact Desk, focused on community education, legal access for low-income families, and public dignity advocacy. And if she's willing, I want Ruth Adams to lead it. Fully employed, fully respected, no apron, no backdoor entrance. Just a seat at the table where she always belonged. Within hours, the post went viral. Lagos blogs reposted it. Corporate influencers on LinkedIn called it brave. Youth-led Twitter pages debated it. Is this growth or PR? Damage control or real remorse? Either way, he didn't lie. At least he said what many never will. Screenshots flew across phones, and by evening, the news had made its way to Yaba. Joy was lying on her bed, phone in hand, when her eyes widened. Ruth, she said, sitting up, come and see this thing. Ruth, who had been sweeping the corner of the room with slow, meditative strokes, turned around. Joy held out her phone. Ruth leaned in, scrolled, read, reread, then sat down quietly. She didn't smile, she didn't frown, she just breathed out. Soft, long, steady. People are talking, Joy said. Some are saying he only wrote it because of pressure. Ruth nodded. Maybe. Do you believe him? Ruth looked at the post again. She traced her finger over the line. No apron. No backdoor entrance. Then she whispered almost to herself, he finally saw me. Across town, inside the living room of David's Lecky house, trouble arrived wearing heels. Sandra stormed in, heels clapping hard on the floor, handbag swinging, eyes already sharp with rage. David had just returned from the office. He hadn't even taken off his tie when the knock turned to banging. He opened the door, and there she was. Her face was tight, lipstick bold, arms folded. You've been ignoring my calls, she said. David stepped aside without a word. She walked in like she owned the place, like she still believed she had control. So that's it, she said, spinning around to face him. You will throw me away because of your maid. David didn't flinch. I didn't throw you away, he said. You walked yourself out the moment you decided to look down on people and laugh at someone else's pain. Sandra scoffed. Oh, please. Don't come and act holy now. We were all joking. Even your Mr. Bello was laughing. David looked her in the eye. No, you weren't joking. You were humiliating someone who worked in my home. Someone more intelligent and valuable than most of the people in your so-called circle. I know I am not blameless, but I think it is time we stop. Her lips parted slightly, caught off guard. David took a step forward. And the worst part, he said, voice low but steady. You made me comfortable with wickedness. Sandra blinked. He continued. You insulted people constantly. Waiters, cleaners, cashiers. You talk to people like they're beneath you, and I let you. That's on me. But this is where it ends. Silence. Sandra narrowed her eyes. So this is it? You're choosing her over me? I'm choosing respect over pride, character over class, peace over performance. Sandra folded her arms again, but her jaw was tight now. You think this is over? I've kept quiet about a lot of things in your firm, David. Things I've seen. Things I can leak. David didn't even blink. I know what you're capable of, and I'm not afraid. Sandra stepped back, surprised. David's voice was calm, no panic, no trembling. I have nothing to hide anymore. If you want to post, post. If you want to expose, go ahead, but know this. I will never again protect cruelty for the sake of comfort. They stood in silence for a long second. Then Sandra laughed once, short and bitter. I hope she's worth it. David didn't answer, because in that moment he knew this wasn't about Ruth. It was about himself, finally learning how to choose what's right. The next morning, the sky over Lecky was cloudy but calm. Ruth sat at a small cafe near Admiralty Road, dressed in a clean blouse and plain trousers, her notebook tucked neatly in her bag. She had chosen this place herself, neutral ground, open air, quiet. She didn't want a boardroom. She didn't want a front porch conversation. She wanted something human, real. And she wanted him to meet her there, not as staff, not as help, but as an equal. At exactly 10 a.m., David Cole arrived. No driver, no suit, no ego, just a man with tired eyes, carrying something that looked like humility. He saw her and paused before walking over. Good morning, he said. Ruth nodded. Good morning. He sat down across from her. For a few seconds they said nothing, just sipped water, breathed, looked around. Then David leaned forward. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. Ruth nodded. You asked with respect, so I came. He exhaled. I owe you more than an apology, he said. And I'm not here to spin anything or defend myself. I didn't see you. I let someone live under my roof for 2 years and I never asked who she was. I just saw a job title, not a person. Ruth looked at him calmly, still quiet. He continued, voice lower. You deserved better, not just from me, from all of us. Another pause. Then he added, and I'm not asking you to come back to work for me. He looked her in the eye. I'm asking you to help me build something. With me. She didn't respond yet. I've launched a social impact desk, he explained. It's not just PR, I want it to be real. Free legal help for domestic workers, market women. People who never walk into a law office because they assume it's not for them. He paused. I don't just want your name attached. I want your mind, your experience, your heart. Ruth let the words settle. Then she opened her bag and brought out her notebook. Flipped to a page she had already written the night before. Here are my conditions, she said. Dave nodded. I'm listening. 1, Ruth said. I'm not house staff again. I don't cook, I don't sweep, I don't iron anybody's shirt. Agreed. 2, I'm paid like a professional, full contract, not thank you money, no allowance, salary. David nodded again. Of course. 3, I want to hire people from the same communities we're trying to serve. Ex-maids, ex-laborers, girls who didn't finish school. Let them grow with it. Perfect. And finally, she said, voice clear, we don't schedule programs at times that exclude the poor. Women who sell in the market don't have time for 10 a.m. seminars. We fit into their lives, not the other way around. David sat back, impressed, and deeply aware that she had already been building the vision, with or without him. You have my full support, he said. She closed the notebook. Then I'll think about it, but only because the work matters, not because you feel bad. David smiled, not from comfort, but from truth. That's fair. They sat in silence again. Then Ruth added softly, next time you live with someone, ask them who they are before you call them just a maid. David nodded slowly. I will. 6 months had passed. The city had moved on, as it always did. But in a quiet corner of Makoko, where wooden houses sat on stilts and children carried books with torn covers, something new had opened its doors. A small building, painted light blue with yellow trim, stood in the middle of a once empty space. No high walls, no marble floors, just clean chairs, clean whiteboards, and a sign that reads, The Ruth Adams Community Hub, Legal aid, literacy, digital access, dignity. Inside, women sat in a circle holding pens and notebooks. One of them was a former cleaner. One sold pepper in bulk. One had just learned how to open an email account. Another had finally written her name without shaking. Beside them, a volunteer lawyer spoke softly, translating legal rights into plain language. At the back of the room, a teenage girl showed an elderly woman how to use WhatsApp. This wasn't charity. It was a transformation. And standing at the center of it all? Not the maid, not the help, but Madame Ruth, wrapped in a soft Ankara skirt and white blouse, sleeves rolled up, clipboard in hand, smile steady, voice calm. She didn't shout to be heard. She simply moved like someone who had found her space and was now making space for others. That afternoon, the cameras came. News vans, campus journalists, Instagram bloggers. But the biggest arrival of the day was a black SUV that pulled up quietly in front of the center. Out stepped Mr. Pierre Okafor, dressed in his signature grey caftan and leather sandals, his presence soft but impossible to ignore. He walked in slowly, looked around, nodded at the setup. Then he found Ruth. When she saw him, her eyes lit up. "Sir," she said, smiling. "Ruth," he replied. "Or should I say, Madam Coordinator." They both laughed. He turned to face the press waiting by the door. And he spoke clearly, so all could hear. "This center you see today is not just a building. It is a correction. A necessary one. Ruth Adams was once hidden behind someone else's title. Not because she lacked talent, but because this country often confuses wealth with wisdom. Nigeria needs to stop wasting people because of pride. We must stop ignoring brilliance because it comes in wrapper, or walks with quiet steps, or serves your food. The future is not waiting for the elite. It's already rising right here in Makoko." Applause followed. Not forced, not formal, just real. From real people. That evening, as the sun began to set over the water, a young boy passed a woman near the gate and pointed at Ruth. "Who's that, auntie?" The woman smiled and replied without thinking. "Na Madame Ruth, the coordinator." 1 year later. The sun was gentle over Lagos for once. In a small but tidy apartment just off the Yaba axis, Ruth stirred a pot of soup while Joy sat at the table, eating crackers and typing loudly on her laptop. Books lined the wall. A houseplant stood proud by the window. No gold, no marble, but it was home. The room smelled of pepper, soap, and peace. Joy looked up. "Auntie Ruth, someone from BBC Africa is asking for a follow-up interview. Should I reply?" "Tell them we'll think about it," Ruth said, smiling. Her phone buzzed. A message from one of the literacy volunteers. Another from the legal desk team in Aja, and one from David. "Stopped by the center today. You weren't there. Hope your meeting went well." She replied, "It did. Say hi to the new interns." She didn't go to David's house often, but when she did, now, she entered through the front door not carrying laundry but carrying reports and ideas. They had found something between them. Not romance, not yet, but respect that didn't need performance. Mrs. Musa still called every Sunday to pray for her. Sometimes Ruth passed by the old house just to greet her, bringing gari or tomatoes. When she came, the compound workers would whisper, "Madam Ruth, don't come again, oh." And she'd smile, hug the cook, and leave quietly. Elsewhere, Sandra's life had taken a different turn. After her failed attempt to blackmail David, threatening to leak dirty secrets about the firm, she found out very quickly. No one wanted her name on their event list anymore. One by one, the doors she had used to mock others began to close. Whispers grew louder. PR companies stopped calling. No one cared about the designer shoes anymore. She lived mostly indoors now, curtains drawn, pride intact but cracked. People said she never tried to apologize to Ruth. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't bring herself to scoop to the level of the maid. And that was the difference. Back in Makoko, the Ruth Adams Community Hub was running its Thursday literacy class when a young girl, no older than 15, walked in quietly and sat near the back. After the class, Ruth approached her. "Are you new?" she asked gently. The girl nodded. Her eyes stayed low. "My aunt sent me to be house help," she said, "but the neighbors say I'm wasting time, that I'll be a maid forever." Ruth knelt slightly so they were eye to eye. She placed a hand gently on the girl's shoulder, then smiled, warm, steady, full of knowing. "No," she said. "You can start as a maid. You don't have to end as one." Outside the center, the evening light reflected off the water. In that small part of Lagos, respect had found a home, not in the hands of the rich, but in the hearts of the resilient. And in the middle of it all stood the woman the world once overlooked. Not just a maid, not just a survivor, but the one who taught the rich how to be human. The end. Value is not salary. Value is capacity. And some stories begin where others assumed they would end.